During an executive offsite, my stepfather laughed. Everyone needs a worker bee to make the queen look good. He pointed at me as the room snickered. I built a silent army within the company over 8 years. When restructuring came, he begged me to put in a good word to save his job. I nodded and handed in my final recommendation. Full termination for cause. He read my name on the report the day he was escorted out. This happened over the span of 8 years, but the moment that started it all, that lit the fire I carried every single day afterward, was one offhand joke. One laugh. One damn finger point in a room full of people. We were in Asheville, North Carolina, for our annual executive offsite. I wasn't an executive, of course. I was an operations analyst, technically reporting under my stepfather, Rick. He was VP of Strategic Growth at the time. Fancy title, meaningless role. If you've ever worked in corporate, you know the type. Talks big, says little, and surrounds himself with people who make him look smarter than he is. The offsite was held in one of those bougie modern lodges. You know, for rustic beams, overpriced coffee, fake fireplaces. There were 20 of us, all squeezed into this uncomfortable semicircle in a glass meeting room that overlooked some overpriced view of the woods. We were doing one of those forced culture-building exercises, run by a consultant who probably charged 20 grand just to ask us, "What is your mission?" Everyone was hungover from the previous night's networking mixer. Most were just waiting for lunch. Then the facilitator asked something simple. "Who here is someone you can count on? Someone who always gets it done?" Rick raised his hand, grinning like he was on a game show. "Oh, that's easy," he said. "Everyone needs a worker bee to make the queen look good." Then he turned full body and pointed straight at me. "That's our bee right here." The room broke into polite chuckles. A few people even clapped. One of the senior directors snorted her coffee. I just stared at my notes. Rick didn't look at me when he laughed. He never did. He just used me. I was his data monkey, his quiet fixer. The one who cleaned up his presentations, ran the numbers, checked his grammar, and even built his talking points. But that day, seeing his finger aimed at me while everyone else laughed, I felt something deep and cold settle in my chest. I didn't even realize I'd clenched my fists until I noticed the pen I was holding had cracked in the middle. I didn't say anything. Not that day. Not for years. But I never forgot. That was the moment I stopped working with Rick and started working around him. After that offsite, something in me changed. I didn't quit. I didn't storm out. I didn't throw a fit. That's not how people like Rick get taken down. Guys like him, they survive drama. They feed off noise. You have to be quieter than them. Smarter. Slower. So I did what he never thought I would. I stayed. I kept my head down. I showed up early. I left late. I did my job better than anyone else in the building. On the surface, I was the same old worker bee. But inside, I had a plan. I started by becoming useful to everyone. When IT needed help streamlining report queries, I was there. When marketing was struggling with client data, I built them custom dashboards. When finance couldn't figure out their expense projection logic, I rewrote the formula and didn't ask for credit. People started to come to me directly. First, it was just for help. But over time, it became respect. Rick didn't notice. He thought he was the sun and the rest of us just orbited him. But he was wrong. People didn't like him, they tolerated him. He had no idea that while he was busy schmoozing the board, I was building something far stronger than connections. I was building trust. It took time. Years. But piece by piece, I mapped the company. I knew who really made decisions and who just took credit. I knew which leaders people trusted and which ones they resented. I didn't speak up at meetings, but I paid attention. I learned how the sausage was made. And eventually I stopped just helping. I started organizing. Quietly, without titles or emails or formal meetings. I began to create a network. Not an official one. A quiet one. A favor trading, truth-sharing, whisper-level network of mid-level staff and trusted managers who all had one thing in common. They were tired of being stepped on by people like Rick. We didn't talk revenge. We didn't even talk about Rick directly. We talked about what we wanted the company to be. We shared stories. We shared problems. And then we shared solutions. Over time, we became an unofficial operating system inside the company. Rick had no clue. Why would he? He never looked down. Then came the big change. The acquisition. We were bought out by a larger firm based in Denver. Suddenly, everything was on the table. Titles. Departments. Budgets. Nothing was safe. The new COO, a woman named Allison, didn't come in swinging. She came in listening. She asked real questions. She looked beyond job titles. One day she pulled me into a closed-door meeting. "I need someone who knows how things actually work here," she said. That's when she invited me to join her internal strategy team, a group tasked with evaluating every department, every leader, and every system. She wanted data. She wanted honesty. She wanted truth without ego. I gave it to her. And that's when things really started to change. Once I was inside the internal strategy group, things moved fast. The COO, Allison, didn't care about politics. She cared about facts. She cared about what worked and what didn't. She asked simple questions that nobody else in the old regime had the guts to ask. Why does this team exist? What value does this executive bring? Who actually leads this department? I gave her answers. Real ones. Not the kind that came from PowerPoint slides. She started calling me her translator. She said I helped turn noise into signal. But I wasn't doing it alone. Remember that quiet network I'd built over the years? It was ready. I called in favors. I reached out to people I trusted in each department, people who knew what really went on, who the bottlenecks were, where the rot lived. We made it formal. Each person became an internal liaison. Their job, gather real feedback anonymously from their teams. We didn't use surveys. We used conversations, notes, observations, honest, raw insight that never showed up in official reports. Every week we met. Every week, the picture became clearer. We called it the silent report. Rick showed up in it. Over and over again. His team said he missed meetings. That he never responded to messages unless the sender had a title above director. He recycled old strategies and presented them like they were new. He dismissed junior staff in public. He didn't know the names of half his team. But the worst part, he didn't know the product. He couldn't explain what our software actually did beyond the buzzwords. He had no clue how it was built, how it scaled, or why it mattered. He threw around phrases like growth leverage and market squeeze. But when pressed, he folded like paper. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't editorialize. I didn't need to. The people he ignored, they were speaking now. And I was the one writing it all down. As the restructure deadline approached, I kept things normal with Rick. We still crossed paths. He still gave me assignments, still copied my work and passed it off as his own. He'd say things like, "We're a good team," or, "You've come a long way since I hired you," like he was proud of himself. He didn't know I was meeting weekly with Allison and the core review group. He didn't know I had a file on him as thick as a legal binder. He didn't know the COO had asked me specifically to write the final recommendation for his department. And I didn't lie. I didn't need to. I just told the truth. Rick always thought he was untouchable. He strutted around the office like he owned the building. Even after the acquisition, he still parked in the executive lot. Still held long-winded strategy meetings that went nowhere. Still barked vague directions at his team, while crediting himself every time a project went well. He acted like nothing had changed. But the rest of us knew. There were whispers in the break room. Questions asked behind closed doors. The org chart was being redrawn, and Rick's box on it wasn't as solid as he thought. A week before the final round of executive evaluations, the tension was thick. People were taking half-days for doctor appointments that were clearly interviews. Directors started clearing their desks a little more than usual. Calendars went private. That's when Rick showed up at my desk. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because the floor was quiet, most of the team was working from home. And I was trying to finish a report for Allison. I heard his shoes before I saw him. Expensive, polished. Too polished. He cleared his throat, standing just beside my monitor. "Hey, champ," he said. "Got a minute?" I hadn't heard him call me champ since I was in college. I looked up. "Sure." He glanced around like he was making sure no one else could hear. Then sat in the chair next to my desk. He leaned in close. His cologne was too strong. Something citrusy and sharp. "I know there's been a lot of chatter lately," he said, voice low. Lot of changes coming down the pipe. I nodded. Didn't say anything. I know you've got some pull now, he added. With Allison. With the review team. I kept my face still. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm not asking for anything shady. I'm just saying if there's anything you can do to vouch for me, put in a good word. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. You and me, we've always had each other's backs, right? I stared at him for a long second. I thought about all the times he'd taken my work and slapped his name on it. The meetings where he acted like I was just some quiet assistant. The offsite. The finger point. The laugh. Worker bee. And I smiled. Yeah, I said. I'll take care of it. He patted my shoulder. Knew I could count on you. Then he walked away like it was already done. I didn't lie to him. I did take care of it. I walked straight to the internal review office. I opened Rick's folder. And I finalized the report. Recommendation. Termination for cause. Reason. Chronic leadership failure, manipulation of staff, misuse of company resources, poor strategic execution, and lack of basic product knowledge. I signed my name at the bottom. I closed the folder. And I waited. The final decision day came faster than anyone expected. There were no dramatic emails. No big announcements. Just a quiet message from HR the night before, saying that a few leadership meetings would be held starting at 9 a.m., and some executives would be given transition options. Everyone knew what that meant. People started arriving early that morning. There was a weird energy in the air, quiet but charged, like a storm about to break. Nobody talked above a whisper. A few execs looked nervous for the first time in years. Rick, on the other hand, showed up in a tailored navy suit like it was just another Thursday. He didn't even have a folder with him. That's how confident he was. By 9:17 a.m., I got a message from Allison. He's next. You might want to be nearby. I walked up to the third floor and sat outside the executive conference room, pretending to check emails on my phone. Rick walked past me 5 minutes later, headed to the room with that smug half-smile he always wore. Wish me luck, he said without stopping. I didn't. The door shut behind him. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I knew what was happening. He would have been handed the report first. It would have been slid across the table by Allison or the HR director. He would have opened it casually, maybe still smirking. Then he would have seen the recommendation, the list of issues, the staff interviews, the summary, and at the bottom in black ink, he would have seen my name. Prepared by my name. The one he'd called champ. The one he'd pointed at like a prop. The one who'd worked late while he took credit. He stayed in that room for 11 minutes. At 10:04 a.m., the door opened. Rick stepped out. His face was pale. His mouth tight. No smile. No confidence. Behind him, the HR director followed with a security liaison standard protocol for terminations, even at the VP level. Rick didn't look at anyone as they walked him back to his office to gather his things. But as they passed me, he glanced up for a second. Our eyes met. He didn't say a word. Not why, not how, not even you. Just stared, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that had already been finished years ago. Then he turned away. He was out by noon. The office was quiet that afternoon. A few people whispered. A few exchanged looks. But most went back to work like nothing had happened. That night my mom called. She'd heard from Rick. He told her I'd turned on him. That I'd made him look bad. That I'd twisted things. She asked me if it was true. I said no. I just told the truth. She didn't say much after that. Family dinners haven't been the same since. Maybe they never will be. But I sleep fine. Because Rick was right about one thing that day in Asheville. Every queen does need a worker bee. He just didn't realize this one could sting. Rick being fired should have been the end. But it wasn't. 3 weeks after he got walked out, I started getting weird calls at work, block numbers silent on the other end. Just breathing. Nothing else. Then emails started trickling into my inbox, from accounts I didn't recognize. Most of them were short. One just said, "Enjoy the crown, Queen Bee." I ignored them at first. Figured Rick was just angry and blowing off steam. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he just needed someone to blame. But then my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. She was crying before I even opened the door. You destroyed him, she said, walking in without asking. You knew what that job meant to him. He was trying to take care of us. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He was a fraud. He used people. You didn't see it, but she cut me off. He gave you a career. You wouldn't even be at that company if it weren't for him. That part hurt, because it was partly true. He had brought me in. But everything I built myself. The network, the trust, the reputation, I earned that. Every late night. Every report. Every time I kept my mouth shut while he cashed the credit. But none of that mattered to her. Not then. You embarrassed him, she said, almost whispering now. He's been calling everyone trying to find out who turned on him. He's convinced someone lied. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. He's coming for you, she said. He won't say it, but I know him. He's angry, scared, desperate. She was right. Rick couldn't let it go. Over the next month, I started hearing things from people I trusted. Recruiters who suddenly stopped calling. An old manager who told me quietly that someone had contacted her about my ethics. It didn't take long to confirm it. Rick was calling around, spreading rumors, saying I had lied on internal reports, that I manipulated staff to make him look worse, that I had an agenda. He wasn't trying to win his job back. He was trying to destroy mine. And he was doing it from the outside. I went straight to Allison, told her what was happening, showed her the emails, the messages, even pulled call logs. She listened, calm as ever. Then she leaned forward and said something I didn't expect. We knew he might come back dirty, she said. That's why we documented everything twice. She opened a file on her screen. My name was at the top. Every step you took, she said. We verified. Independently. You're clean. I should have felt relieved. But I didn't, because I knew Rick. He wasn't going to stop with rumors. He wanted revenge. And he didn't care if he took me and the whole company down with him.